Hi everyone, this is Laura Hammock from the Marble Jar channel, and in today's video I will give you my summary and takeaways from the book I Never Thought of It That Way: How to Have Fearlessly Curious Conversations in Dangerously Divided Times by Monica Guzman. So I just finished reading the book I Never Thought of It That Way by Monica Guzman. My introduction to this book and this author was through the Psychotherapy Networker Conference that I attended back in February. She was on a panel with Esther Perel and Bill Doherty to talk about bridging political divides. I enjoyed her perspective since she is a journalist, not a therapist, and is a liberal with two Mexican immigrant parents who voted for Trump. She has really had to walk the walk in terms of talking and loving people who hold different ideas than she does. So this book is about having conversations with people who believe really different things than you do. It's about how to bridge the political divide, which feels vast and insurmountable these days. So I know this is going to be kind of an unwelcome topic for many, particularly right now where there's so much real pain and suffering as a result of drastic and seemingly capricious decisions by the current administration. It's hard to imagine bridging any kind of divide right now when we seem to have such different perspectives, and sometimes cruelty seems to be one of the goals. And also, if we want to take care of this country of ours, we have to learn how to make decisions together. After all, that's what a democracy is all about. Without being able to communicate with those on the other side, we cannot be good stewards of this nation's future. So I just wanted to tell you a little bit about me and why this matters to me based on my own experiences. I grew up in an area where I was very different from the vast majority of people. The rural county where I was raised was uniformly white, conservative, and Christian. And for lots of reasons, I wasn't really any of those things. So I always felt a little different. That said, I really appreciated the willingness of others to talk with me, accept me as a friend, and be curious about my background. Without that, I would have had a pretty lonely childhood. Fast forward to now, I'm primarily a couples and relationship counselor, and I coach people all day long on how to have difficult discussions with people who they care about who believe really different things. And sometimes those discussions can get extremely heated and can be really high stakes. I think these skills are absolutely crucial for all of us. A lot of times we're just arguing about different things and we don't even realize it. Again, at this moment in time, the last thing we want to do is talk to people who we disagree with, particularly if we have lost our job, our health care has been impacted, or we have family members who are at risk of deportation. It's a scary time for many, and yet our country is divided. We live in political silos. We receive our news from different sources, and we're not even operating from the same set of truths. If we want to be able to make decisions and run this country together, we are going to need to use some of the principles from this book to bridge our divides. First, let's talk about the way this book is set up. She talks about why it is that we are so divided right now. Then she talks about the main quality that we have to draw upon in order to bridge the gap: curiosity. And then she has three other parts that talk about the main ingredients of open conversations: considering the people, their paths, and inviting honesty. Here's a quick summary. The author sees political polarization as the giant problem facing us, the one that eats all other problems. There are a lot of reasons for this, but she has a handy acronym for the biggest three reasons: SOS: sorting, othering, and siloing. We do this SOS behavior to keep ourselves comfortable, particularly when we're scared, but it tears us away from reality. She talks about moments when you think to yourself, I never thought of it that way, as aha moments that bridge perspective gaps. She wants to be in hot pursuit of these kinds of moments because, in order to bridge the gaps, we sometimes require a whole shift in our way of seeing things. In other words, those moments when you think to yourself, never thought of it that way. What I usually do with these summary and takeaway videos is that I pick out 5 to 10 things that I took away from the book, either that were surprising to me or that helped me understand something. I almost always pick out more than 10, so we'll see in this video how many I actually get to. Takeaway number one is sorting. My first three takeaways are going to be about those SOS behaviors that prevent us from seeing things from a different perspective. The first one is sorting, and it essentially just means that we tend to hang out with people who think the same things we do. I remember having this discussion with my father-in-law, who is a political science professor for 40 years. He said that one of the most dramatic changes in politics came in the 1990s when Newt Gingrich changed the workday for Congress from 5 days a week to 3 days a week. So it doesn't seem like that big of a deal. But what ended up happening was that our politicians would travel to work 3 days a week and leave their families at home in their districts instead of bringing them to live in DC. When they all lived in DC, they would socialize with each other, their kids would play soccer together, and they would have relationships with all of the other political families, including the ones that were across the aisle. All of that ended with the 5 day work week, and our politicians ended up sorting themselves into like-minded groups and not really having that much contact with people from the other side of the aisle, which really doesn't help you to see things from the other side. So the author also gave this other example in her chapter on sorting. And this was kind of an impactful story, at least on me, about the former CEO of General Motors, Alfred P. Sloan. So apparently he was at a conference table or a committee meeting or something, and he said something like, "I take it we're all in agreement, complete agreement on the decision here." And then he said, "Then I propose we postpone future discussion of this matter until next meeting to give ourselves time to develop disagreement and perhaps gain understanding of what the decision is all about." Fantastic example of not sorting yourself and making sure you're getting exposure to opinions that are different from yours. Takeaway number two, othering. So if the first S in SOS is sorting, then the O stands for othering. So othering is when you react to competing beliefs as totally unnatural or wrong, and you react with disgust and repulsion to those who believe it. In other words, instead of thinking that those opinions are just different, you think of them as hateful and despicable. So it is hard for us to be generous to people who hold perspectives that worry us or seem harmful. It is much easier to other them. Okay, this was such an interesting point. A 2020 study looking at empathy across the political divide found that people who are more empathetic are more likely to feel angry at people in the opposite party and enjoy it when they suffer. This was fascinating to me. So, in other words, if you are empathetic, you are more likely to make people with different beliefs your enemy and more likely to enjoy it if they suffer. Takeaway number three, siloing. The last S in SOS is siloing. I have to say that sorting and siloing in my mind are very close to each other. So I'm not sure I could tell you the difference with any kind of certainty, but I believe that silos have to do with the fact that when we are not exposed to ideas that differ from ours, we think of those views and we think of those views as wrong and repugnant. Our viewpoint gets distorted and we start looking for simple, certain answers rather than the truth. It's kind of like comfortable to be in an information silo. There's a comfort in hearing what we want to hear, and siloing makes that easy. Takeaway number four, curiosity. Okay, so the author has this quote that I love. Curiosity is a serious thing, and it is past time we get serious about it. So curiosity is the thing that gets us around all of these conversational warfare trenches that exist. And apparently there are two different kinds. There is something called deprivation-based curiosity, which is all about needing to know a specific fact. Like when you're having a conversation with friends and you can't think of a word or a fact and it's driving you nuts, that's deprivation-based curiosity. It's time limited and apparently it disappears once you've remembered that one thing. The other kind is interest-based curiosity, and it's a much longer-term, abundant type of curiosity. And we really want to lean into interest-based curiosity when we're in difficult conversations. Takeaway five, traction dial. So I actually love this concept. She has a way to determine whether the environment that you're in is set up well for a good, productive conversation, and it's called a traction dial. Essentially, you need 5 different things to be true in order to have the best possible outcome for a difficult conversation. And the 5 things are as follows: time, In other words, do you have enough of it to be able to have a conversation that's deep enough and that gives enough room for differing viewpoints? Attention. Are you both paying attention, or is there, fragmented attention? The third one is parity. So that's essentially equality between you, or do you have a really big platform and are lecturing the other person? It's another way to say equity. Is there like equal status between the two of you? The fourth one is containment, meaning are you on a big public forum, or is it just the two of you in the room? The more containment you have, the better your chances of a positive outcome. In other words, don't have these conversations on social media where there's a giant audience watching. And then finally, the fifth one is embodiment, meaning are you in person or not? And there's a range of this from like like battling it out over social media comments, which has no embodiment at all, to physically being in person, which is the most embodied you can be. So obviously having like a voice to voice phone call is better than text to text, etc. The more you can be physically in each other's presence, the better the chances are of success are. So these 5 things are important to remember if you're trying to have a difficult conversation. Do you have enough time, attention, parity or equality, containment, or embodiment or physical presence? Paying attention to these elements is more likely to get you a better conversation. Takeaway number 6, people are mysteries. She makes the point that people are mysteries, not puzzles. Puzzles are orderly. They have a beginning of an end. A lot of times you just need to find that missing piece and snap it into place and you get it all figured out. People are not like that. Instead, they are endless and they are complicated mysteries to explore. And unfortunately, they don't give us the satisfaction of definite solutions the way that puzzles do. Takeaway number 7, we don't choose our opinions. So this was a little bit of a surprise to me, to be honest. It also really rang true. Have you ever had that happen where it's kind of like a surprise to hear it, but it also just like feels true when you hear it? We don't choose our opinions. They are formed naturally over the course of our lives. So, for example, she gives this like super charming example of her husband, who's a big Star Wars fan. He could no sooner switch to being a Star Trek fan than most of us could switch our opinion on something that really matters to us. So, a lot of that has to do with his personal history with Star Wars and the stories that go along with that, which brings me to the next point. Takeaway number 8, stories are crucial. She gives a fantastic quote from youth advocate and entrepreneur Darius Ballinger, and it goes something like this: the shortest distance between two people is a story. We need to dig for stories because that's how our opinions are made. We need to tell our stories and we need to listen to the stories of others. Sharing these stories is essential to sharing and understanding each other. Takeaway number 9, underlying values. So this is something I learned from reading Jonathan Haidt's The Righteous Mind. A lot of times our opinions reflect our values, and our values reflect our stories or experiences. Dig for the values, and it helps us understand each other better. What I found really interesting was that she talks about Schwartz's 10 different values. I guess there are 10. I'm used to thinking about the 6 that Jonathan Haidt talks about in his book, but I'm super open to there being more. The thing is, values sometimes conflict with each other. For example, when we were making decisions after 9/11 as a country, the values of security and safety came bumping up against our values for self-direction and freedom. We decided as a country to give up some of our freedoms in order to feel safer boarding airplanes. And all 10 of these values are important for human flourishing. Some of them are more individual and some are more focused on societal good, but none of them are bad. Understanding someone's values and how they prioritize them will help you see the world through their eyes. And finally, takeaway number 10, raw questions. Raw questions are those that have been stripped of assumptions and frustrations. These are harder to come up with than you might think. It is very easy to ask a leading question. It is really easy to ask a question that is actually an accusation. It is easy to let our frustrations and assumptions come through in our questions, which can have the impact of shutting down any future conversation. Coming up with raw questions is a matter of stripping out all of the frustrations and assumptions. And she talks about how they do this in some of the workshops she's participated in. I do this with couples, and it is hard work. In the end, it is worth asking those raw questions because those are the ones that help us bridge the divide. I had something like 5 or 6 additional takeaways, but I don't have time to talk about all of them. There is an organization called Braver Angels that facilitates these types of conversations. It was founded by Bill Doherty, who's a couples therapist, and the author, Monica Guzman, is on the board. There are a lot of things that I loved about this book, but there are just a couple of drawbacks. I got a little confused about her acronym LOOP and the traction words like grip and balance, but it wasn't that important in the end. The only other thing that I really do actually think is important is that I don't think there was quite enough emphasis on how emotionally dysregulating these conversations can be. You can't really have a productive conversation if your emotional intensity is over a 5 out of 10. It's better for you to just take some time to calm down before you re-engage. She does have some tips on bringing your intensity level down, but it needs an entire chapter or more because that's what's happening to a lot of our conversations that are blowing sky high because of emotional intensity. If we can learn to walk away and calm ourselves down when we're feeling that higher level of intensity, conversations would be so much more productive and bridging. So that's just a snippet from this book. I think you should read it. And if you do, come back here and let me know what you think in the comment section. Thank you so much for watching.